Hi there, I'm Jen, this is Remembered Reads, and this is going to be a pair of tags because I'm behind on tags, and I thought it would be funny to include a very meta tag and then a very traditional tag. So the very meta tag is the tag about tags, which was created by Roz from Scallydandling About the Books, and I was tagged by Courtney Ferreter and Hannah's Books. And the very traditional tag is the This is Jeopardy tag, which was created by Naomi's Bookshelf, and I was tagged by Berna from Berna's Bookish Adventures. I will link to everybody that I just mentioned and their versions of this tag below. So here we go, the tag about tags. Question number 1 is tag firsts. Did you do the Booktube Newbie Tag? And if not, what was your first tag? Do you choose to watch Newbie Tags? I did not do the Booktube Newbie Tag. I did the New to Booktube tag, which is a slightly different tag, one that far fewer people do, and really I should have done the Newbie Tag. The New to Booktube tag had better questions, I thought, and I know other people who have done it have thought so as well, but the issue is that the Newbie Tag really exists so that you can introduce yourself to people, because when it is one of the first tags that you do, you don't really know what your channel is going to be like, so trying to find good questions is actually not the best idea, so I should have done the Newbie Tag, but I didn't. I did the New to Booktube tag. I do search for the Newbie Tag and the New to Booktube tag, although fewer people do that these days, to find new channels, and I used to go through and say hello to almost everyone. I've gotten out of the habit of doing that lately because it just, with all of the overlapping lockdowns around the world, so many more people have started channels that it just became too much of a time commitment, and I felt uncomfortable with the fact that sometimes I would go through and have time to say hello to a bunch of people, and then other times I just didn't have time. So yeah, I still try to go in and out, but there are so many new channels now that it's much harder to keep up with than it was a couple of years ago. Question number 2 is tag emotions. What feelings do tags provoke in you? Tag joy or tag delight? Tag boredom or resentment? Guilt or anxiety? Even tag envy? Honestly, it depends on the tag. The first time I was tagged in something that wasn't the Newbie Tag, obviously no one's actually tagged in it. Well, actually a few people are. In any case, I don't remember what the tag was, but I still remember the person who tagged me. It was the music snob, who doesn't make videos anymore, but they are still on Booktube because I sometimes see them in the live chats on that Mara from Books Like Woe does. And I always think, the music snob, the person who tagged me first. And that's a nice warm fuzzy feeling. My issue with tags is I always get backed up on them, so people stop tagging me, and then I feel left out. So then I go back to doing tags, so then I get caught up and do tags that I did 6 months ago, so then people tag you again. Honestly, it depends on the tag. The tags that are really great discussion starters, I really enjoy doing. Tags that are you have to find one book specific, I sometimes find more challenging just because I saw somebody else mention this, but I think it was Heidi from My Reading Life who mentioned this in her version of this tag, that a lot of tag videos that ask you to name a book assume that you're reading fiction and probably some kind of genre fiction. They're much easier to read if most of your reading is fantasy, science fiction, romance, mystery, that kind of thing. Whereas if you mostly read other things, sometimes they don't fit quite as well. Question number 3 is tag favorites. What kind of tags do you like most and least to do and to watch? To a certain extent it depends on the person. There are some people who can make even the really generic tags funny, and there are some tags that are such good discussion starters that I will search for them and watch channels that I've never heard of before, and sometimes I discover new channels that way because they're doing a really interesting tag. Especially some of the random question tags. Not so much now, because again, the time suck element is around and that I think there's so many more channels. But a couple of years ago, when some of those random question tags were going around then, I would sometimes search, and I did find all kinds of new channels based on that. Question number 4 is tag style. How do you tag, and do you have a system for keeping track of when you were tagged or tags you plan to do? Do you prepare to do tags or just wing it? I am completely unprepared basically all the time. That explains my choppy editing style, because I have had people comment on that before, and otherwise you would have to listen to me saying, I have no idea for 10 minutes, and nobody wants that. So maybe I should prepare. As for tracking tags, I just try to keep a mental note most of the time, and I sometimes take screenshots if someone has tagged me, and then I can look at it when I'm 6 months behind and remember that they tagged me. So that's how I keep track of that. I don't tend to keep track of people who have done things before when I'm tagging people, so I have, just this month, tagged people who have just done the video that I've just tagged them in already, so. Question number 5 is tag memories. Of the tags you have watched, done, or created, which have stuck in your memory? Are there any you would like to revisit or revive? Well, like I said, I really enjoyed some of the random questions tags that were going around. I think I said 2 years ago, but I think it was actually 3 or 4 now. Because there was one that was about half bookish questions and half personal questions, and because of that, I found out all kinds of things about people that I had no idea about before. So that was kind of interesting in a nosy way, but because I don't remember what the actual tag was, I can't say that I want to bring it around again. I do enjoy that the New York Times by the book tag is making another go around. That's a lot of fun. And I do like, as I said, all of the tags that are really discussion starters. Those are fun. All right, that is all of those. Next up, Jeopardy! Dun, 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 dun. Okay, so the first question doesn't have a number. So the first question is the host, a narrator you love. My favorite narration in a novel is in Harry Parker's Anatomy of a Soldier, which is a novel that is narrated by stuff. The story is completely nonlinear. The chapters are essentially at random, and we follow this British Army officer and a teenage Afghan insurgent, and we know basically from the first chapter that the teenager dies and the army captain loses his legs, but we jump around in their lives, and the chapters are narrated by their stuff. They're narrated by their boots and their shoes and by explosive devices and by prosthetics and glasses and things like that. So it's really interesting stylistically. It's the kind of thing that if it doesn't work for you, you're probably not going to enjoy that, but it worked for me and I thought it was fantastic. So that was a great narration choice. Categories: before and after, a combination of two titles. That is why I should prepare, isn't it? This is a lesson. All right, let's say, no going back to the junction. I don't know. That's somebody is going to have great spine poetry for this, but it is not going to be me. Number 2 is science, a book that made you react. So I was reading Song of a Captive Bird by Jasmine Darznik, along with Shannon from That's So Poe. She has dropped out because this is not the best book, to be honest. But what made me react is that I have also read that author's memoir, and a bunch of the scenes in this book are exactly like the scenes in the memoir. So, and this is supposed to be about a real person, a poet. But the scenes from the memoir are about the author's mother's life, so it's like reading this as a fictionalized biography of the poet is incorrect. This is actually about the author's mother, in part. Or the author's mother in an alternative universe where she becomes a poet, maybe. So I kind of laughed at that when I realized that that's what was going on in there. Question number 3 is literature. What is your current read? What I just held up was one of my current reads. My other current read is, sorry, that's glare, The First World War and Its Aftermath, The Shaping of the Modern Middle East, which is essentially a collection of essays by a variety of academics about various situations that arose during the period when the British and French took over territory that used to be occupied by the Ottoman Empire. Needless to say, depressing stuff. No one has ever written anything uplifting about the First World War and its aftermath. I'm exaggerating slightly because that's not completely true. This doesn't matter. I'm going to go on a tangent. Some disability history actually improves after the First World War just because of the number of surviving casualties. But this is not what we're talking about here, so never mind. Question number 4 is American history, a book that embodies your culture. I guess because Jeopardy is American. Alex Trebek was not. Was he from Sudbury? He's from someplace in what I think of as Northern Ontario, but people from actual Northern Ontario don't consider Northern. I think his mother was French-Canadian and his father was a Ukrainian immigrant. I don't even know how to define my own culture. However, as I like to say, it's complicated. But I'm going to say this book, Aisha at Last, which is a Pride and Prejudice retelling, is set here in Scarborough in the eastern end of Toronto. And there's a lot of depressing Canlit that's set in South Scarborough, but this is more like this area. And there's a line in here about driveways that have been enlarged in ways that are in violation of city bylaws technically, but everybody does it, which is the most recognizably this neighborhood that I have ever seen. I don't think I've ever recognized this neighborhood as much as, or seen it portrayed as well as was in this book. And I mean, in addition to the driveway thing, just the normalization of intergenerational living and whatnot, because that's normal here and something that annoys me in books that kind of assume that North America is this big place where nobody does that, which isn't true. But I did read recently that while the percentage is something like 5% in Toronto as a whole, it's 15% in Scarborough, and in this part of Scarborough it's almost a quarter, so much more common here, which is represented there. Question number 6 is World History, a book that is about a different culture than yours. This is Daria Bogdanska's Wage Slaves, which is a graphic memoir about labor struggles among not necessarily undocumented, but people who are working without work permits in Sweden. And she is Polish and living in Sweden, which are both countries that I am not from and have never lived in. And I've never led any labor protests, so that is unfamiliar to me as well. Question number 7 is Word Origin, a translated book. The Russian, what is this? The Ukrainian and Russian Notebooks, Life and Death Under Soviet Rule is translated from Italian, I believe. Yeah, depressing stuff. Question number 8 is colleges and universities, the best book you read in school. The best book I read in school, as in high school, was Timothy Finley's The Wars, which continues to be one of my favorites. It is a work of historiographic metafiction in which theoretically there is some framework in which we have somebody in the modern day looking back and researching things that happened in the First World War, but the great bulk of it is bits and pieces of someone who's going off to war, who's in training, who's in the war, who's coming back, who's seeing who's injured, who's going to the brothels and whatnot. That is great. I only took one English class in university. We had a breadth requirement, so in first year I took an archetypal themes in literature class, in which I read actually 2 of my favorite books, Robertson Davies' Fifth Business and Michael Ondaatje's In the Skin of a Lion, both of which are very Canadian. Actually, so's The Wars. Question number 8 is history. What is your favorite time period to read about? Given the number of First World War titles that I've just mentioned, clearly it is the First World War. Question number 10 is sports, a fast-paced book. I feel like I should just name a book about sports instead. No, you know what? The fastest-paced books are all of those books about habit building, Atomic Habits, Hello Habits, How to Build Habits. All of those are usually very quick reads, and I think the idea behind that is that you're supposed to get through quickly so that you start building actual habits instead of just reading this book. So I'm going to say Atomic Habits, which I'm in the middle of reading. And I guess if it were actually fast-paced, I would have finished it already. So maybe that was a bad example. I don't know. All right. That is the end of this list. As I mentioned in the first tag, I don't remember who has or hasn't done these tags, but if you are watching this, please consider yourself tagged in both of these, because they're both entertaining. And there we go. Anyway, that's it for now. Ciao.
You have to walk on that